Hello everyone and welcome to a very exciting game from round 2 of the Tata Steel Chess Tournament 2022. It's Magnus Carlsen versus Anish Giri, and if you remember, after his World Chess Championship match against Yanni Pomniachtchi, Magnus said that he might not defend the next time he's challenged to a World Chess Championship match unless it is by Alireza Firouzja, but he did say that he will try and achieve the, so far unachievable rating in classical time format of 2900. And it's not going to be easy because you have to beat top level players constantly for a very long time, or have like one really perfect tournament, and then maybe it can be achieved. So he played Yesipenko in round 1. That game ended in a draw. Magnus had a sort of an attempt at a winning position, but he missed the idea. If you guys watched the press conference after the game, Magnus said, all right, I can see why the agency is saying that, so I don't want to debate it, but it was obviously too difficult to spot. So now he faces Anish Giri, and that's never easy. As you've seen in the World Rapid and Blitz Championship, Anish defeated Magnus, and he even winked at the camera afterwards. But okay, that being said, let's check it out, as this game has quite a lot to offer. So Magnus, with the white pieces, opens with d4. Knight to f6 by Giri, we have c4, e6, knight to f3, and d5. So a standard Queen's Gambit declined, and Magnus goes for g3. He goes for the Catalan opening. He's ready to develop the bishop to g2. So bishop to e7, bishop to g2, and here Anish castles. We have castles, and now finally d captures on c4. So what do you play here? Knight to a3. A very exotic choice by Magnus. He's saying, I want to reclaim the pawn. My knight is guarding b5, so I'm not allowing pawn to b5. But also, if you want to capture my knight, you can. This will mess up my pawn structure, but I get to have the bishop pair and you don't. So it's definitely best to do this. Anish goes for it, even though it kind of means going into Carlsen's preparation. But yeah, I mean, you don't... sometimes people refuse to play the best move in order to avoid someone's preparation, but Anish, of course, goes straight into it. B captures on a3, and now bishop to d7. And now the thing is, if you go something like knight e5, which is a move Magnus definitely wants to play, we're going to play bishop to c6. That's how we defend everything along this diagonal. And after knight captures, bishop captures, and it would be 2 bishops against 2 knights, with Anish having, he's up a pawn, but he has a doubled c pawn, Magnus has a doubled a pawn, perfectly fine for both players. So instead of this, after bishop to d7, Magnus goes a4, and now we have bishop to c6. So the bishop claims this diagonal. We have bishop to a3, as the a3 square was freed for the bishop, and now rook to e8. The rook on f8 was under attack, so queen to c2, now threatening to pick up the pawn, and you could defend it with bishop to d5, but then you're kind of saying, okay, this bishop is now basically a pawn, and well, you can't really keep it if white doesn't allow it. You can play knight to d2, you could go after the pawn, trade off the light square bishops. So playable, but not of any interest to Anish, it would seem. So here Anish plays knight b to d7, and it is now, as of move 11, that we have a completely new game. Now, Magnus could capture on c4 with the queen, and then Anish will win a tempo with knight to b6, but Magnus first goes rook 8 to c1, and now Anish went into a deep think, and after some 30 minutes, he played a6. And okay, now Magnus wins back the pawn, queen captures on c4, and now knight to b6. And what's interesting here is the situation on the clock. Magnus has 1 hour and 36 minutes, whereas Anish is already down to 56 minutes. So Magnus has more time than when he started, meaning that he's well within his preparation. But here, after knight to b6, not so much, because... now he also is out of preparation, or maybe he saw it and then he just needs to remember there are many possible retreat squares for the queen. Queen to b4, queen to d3, queen to c2, queen... where do you put the queen? Because the a4 pawn will fall. It's only a matter of whether Anish will capture it with the bishop or with the knight. So here Magnus plays queen back to c3, and now if you capture with the bishop, doesn't really do all that much, but capturing with the knight forces Magnus to waste another tempo. So this is what Giri goes for. Knight captures on a4, and now queen to b3. And now you have to be careful. There are some ideas of eliminating the defender of the knight, just winning material here. So Anish has to figure out how to continue here, and he plays queen to d5, which is a fine move. but there was also the very interesting idea of just knight back to b6, and then Magnus would play rook captures on c6. This pretty much forced, and no doubt something Magnus had in his home analysis. Maybe not this exact same position, but I'm fairly sure the ideas exist, regardless of maybe a move here and there being played differently. So here, knight e5, queen captures on d4, and now knight captures on c6, attacking the queen. And the idea is once the queen moves, we're going to deliver knight to e7 check and open up and attack towards the rook here. So it's going to be fine. Queen c4, let's say knight e7 check, king to h8, we're going to play bishop captures on a8, and now after, let's say queen captures, a captures, rook captures on a8, and we would have this position where Anish would be up a pawn, but still it's a bishop and knight versus two knights, so the bishop would probably enjoy some counterplay here, but this should not be, you know, better for anyone. So instead, after queen to b3, Anish went for queen to d5. He offers a queen trade right away, but Magnus still goes for rook captures on c6. And now you can play queen captures on b3 first to trade the queens, because after a captures, the knight is also attacked. And once you capture the rook, we're going to capture the knight on a4, and we're just much better here. So instead, after rook captures on c6, queen captures on c6, and now Magnus gets to play knight to e5. So you can see how all of this was made with the plan of bringing the knight to e5, and look at these bishops. Bishop slicing here, the knight on a beautiful e5 square, the queen attacking the rook might come to b1 or c1, put pressure on this pawn, then the f7 might become weak. So there's a lot of potential in the position. Of course, if black plays perfectly, then it won't happen, but that's why we play chess. So queen to b5, and now, of course, Magnus avoids the queen trade, queen to c2. And now the situation is 1 hour for Magnus, some 45 minutes for Anish, and the position is, well, it's very scary. Only one move is pretty much good for Anish, and I will show it because it wasn't played, but you have to bring the knight back with knight to b6, point being that after bishop captures on b7, you can't really move the rook. If you play rook 8 to d8 or something, then bishop to c6, and white just wins. So the point is, after bishop captures on b7, you have to play knight to c4. It's not easy to spot, but it's there for a reason. Bishop captures on a8, knight captures on a3, attacking Carlsen's queen, queen to c6, and now, for example, queen captures on e2, bishop to b7, and now queen captures on a2. And yes, it's not all that aesthetically pleasing, but black will be fine here. For example, knight g4, we want to remove the defender of the rook here. King f8, now the king defends the rook. Let's say knight captures, g captures, queen f3. White would have a lot of great moves here, but still, if you play perfectly, you should hold it. So that's probably why Anish decided against this move, and he played knight to d5. But knight to d5 doesn't work, and it's not... well, it doesn't work for one very specific reason, and that is rook to b1. Rook to b1 or bishop to e4. It's all in the air, because bishop to e4 is just winning even more space for white. It will force g6, and that's going to weaken black's position much more. In the future, we might have, if g6 is played, some knight g4 or knight d7 ideas with the df6 and h6 squares being weak. But okay, here Magnus went for rook to b1, and now it's not easy for the black queen here. Look at the bishop here, look at the knight, look at the rook, look at the queen. All of these squares are controlled by white, and you simply don't have a good square for the queen. Anish plays queen to a5. This is the only square available for the queen, and now Magnus plays bishop captures on d5. And this is not the most precise way. Bishop to e4 is a bit more precise. First, threaten the h7 pawn, and only after g6, then we capture here. Captures, and now rook captures on b7, and this is now very weak for black. It's pretty much the position that we got in the actual game, only without the weakening with the g6 move. So instead, bishop captures on d5 was played right away, and here Anish thought about the position for a little bit, but he played e captures on d5. He didn't want to give up the knight on a4, even though that's exactly what you should do here. After queen captures on d5, queen captures on a4, Now it's possible to play f6, and after the knight moves, queen captures on a2, and it's still bishop and the knight for a rook, but black will have some counterplay. White is of course better, but maybe nothing decisive. So instead, after bishop captures on d5, Anish played e captures on d5. He wanted to hold everything together, and now rook captures on b7, similar to what we talked about, only without the inclusion of g6, and now there really isn't a good move here for Anish. You could try something like knight to c3, as it's, well, the c7 pawn is hanging, you can't move the queen, the knight is hanging, it's just a terrible position for black, and if something like c3, it looks like it can be played because you block the queen's attack towards this pawn, also you remove the knight from a4 as a target, but there's a bishop to b4, and now after queen captures on a2, we can play queen captures on c3, and again, it's not very good for black. So instead, Anish played c5, which makes sense. You block the bishop, you try and get this, then the knight falls, but the position is now completely winning for Magnus. So feel free to pause the video and try to find the winning idea while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on spotting the winning idea, and for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, of course the move is queen to f5. We just bring more firepower to that f7 square, and that's how we win this. You could go for captures right away, but for example, if knight captures here, you allow this annoying queen to e1 check, king to g2, and queen captures on e2, and well, there's just no reason to allow this. Now you don't have queen f5 because queen e4 check can just trade off the queens, and this would be a draw at best. So instead, queen to f5, this is deadly. You are now threatening queen captures on f7, followed by queen captures on g7 checkmate. So here, rook to f8, you have to defend, but now knight captures on f7. And here, again, you can't capture because just captures with checkmate. So here, queen to d8. A beautiful move by Anish, but also an insufficient one. His idea is that if Magnus goes for knight captures here, then he can capture the queen on f5. But Magnus just plays d captures on c5. If you go for knight to h6, it looks very nice because you can't capture due to checkmate, but you can just move the king, and now white really has nothing better than to repeat and then play the move that he actually played in the game. So here Magnus plays d captures on c5. It's possible to play with the bishop, but Magnus prefers to keep the bishop in the game because the knight on a4 isn't doing all that much. So here, queen to f6, offering a queen trade, and now Magnus just trades because the resulting endgame is winning for him. So queen captures, g captures, and now knight to h6 with check. The rook controls the 7th rank, so you have to move to h8. It's the only move. Now comes c6, not only advancing the pawn, but opening up a discovery here. So rook f to c8, and now c7. And now the position is beautiful for white. This rook can't go anywhere. This rook also doesn't really have all that much to do. We're just going to attack it. Probably knight f5, knight here, or knight here will attack the rook, and that's pretty much winning the game. So here Anish tries a little trick, knight to c3. But it's not, the trick doesn't work. His idea was if Magnus goes maybe knight f5, maybe he can play rook captures on c7. For example, rook captures knight b5, but it's still not enough. After rook to d7, knight captures on a3, yes, you win back material, but rook captures on d5, we're in an endgame where Magnus is up 2 pawns. This will be completely winning for Magnus. So instead, Magnus says, all right, that might be too big of a grind, perhaps, so let's just go bishop to b2, keep the bishop on the board, and now let's just play what I came here to do. d4, and now knight to f7 with check. King g7, and now knight to d6, attacking the rook here. And now you could capture the e2 pawn with check, but it doesn't really do anything, so king to g6 was played, and now king to f1. Magnus has 40 minutes on the clock, whereas Anish has only 1 minute on the clock. He played knight to b5, attacking the knight here, but now he basically forces knight captures on c8, and Magnus cannot wait any longer. So knight captures on c8, rook captures, and now a4. forcing the trade here. Knight captures on c7, bishop captures on d4. Now comes knight to e6, attacking the bishop. And here Magnus just played bishop to e3, guarding the c1 square so you don't have any checks, and also keeping an eye on this knight so the knight can't really go anywhere. Well, the bishop is just a beautiful piece here. Magnus is up 2 pawns, and of course this is a completely winning endgame. Anish knows it, Magnus knows it, and therefore it was in this position on move 36 that Anish Giri resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. So yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. So it was pretty crazy stuff from Magnus here, sort of playing a little bit like Dubov here, only okay a bit more safely. But yeah, it seems that he employed the Dubov recipe here, enjoying you know, a comfortable disadvantage, you know, before equalizing and then you know, just running your opponent over. And even though Magnus drew his first game in the Tata Steel, this brings him much closer to the his actual goal of becoming the first player to be rated 2900 in classical chess. So we'll see how it goes. Plenty more rounds to go. He might win all of them, he might lose some, so you know, he might even lose rating in this tournament. We'll see how it goes. And as a lot of you are interested, Magnus did not wink at the camera after this game finished. I know you guys were really wondering about that. So yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I would like to thank Link, Mike Wagner, Joseph Henderson, Frank Combs, and Jan Toplas for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of this spectacular event until it finishes. Thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.